Hello, I'm Jocelyn. I will be refuting the claim that creating more parking is not the best option to decrease traffic congestion at Cal Poly Pomona. The advocate's secondary claims were that creating more parking will result in more traffic, that the populations of students is growing each year, and that public transportation is a better option. For their first secondary claim, more parking will result in more traffic. The advocate uses the reasoning that more parking and traffic lanes will encourage more students to use cars to come to school. This acts as more of a hasty generalization since there is no evidence the advocate uses to support this claim. Then the advocate uses an article by the University at Albany State, University of New York, stating that the greatest explanation for traffic congestion correlates to the amount of cars on the street, which acts as more of a definition to traffic congestion rather than support to showing how parking will result in more traffic or showing how more parking or traffic lanes correlate to more traffic congestion. For their second secondary claim, the amount of students enrolled is only getting bigger. The advocate uses a data set provided by Cal Poly Pomona to show the increasement of new freshman enrollment and the difference of fall 2015's enrollment of 3,658 students in comparison to fall 2010's enrollment of 2019 students. The advocate does show that the student population is rising, but in terms of the original claim, this is more of an unavoidable future outcome than support or more of a fact. Since the school continues to increase the amount of enrollments allowed, it seems to really counteract the argument because there needs to be enough parking to accommodate them. Since there are people who have a car because it's more convenient or because of scheduling conflicts or other things of that nature. The next piece of evidence the advocate brings up is the new parking structure being built for the 2016 year, which will provide 1,825 spaces and cost $41 million. To which the advocate stated that the parking structure will only be able to provide enough parking for close to 5 years and at the rate of this new enrollments. But the advocate fails to take into account the turnover rate for these spaces, which will add more years to the parking structure. The Director of Parking and Transportation Services at Cal Poly Pomona, Michael Biaggi, gives the statistic of turnover rate of 2.5 for the already 12,100 spaces available on campus, meaning that each space on campus averages an opening about 2 or 3 times a day. Also, all these new students will most likely not be on campus at the same time, leaving a bunch of new parking spaces open. Nor did the advocate take into account that not all of the students included in the new enrollments might not have or need cars. According to the 2014 Common Data Set for Cal Poly Pomona, 45% of the freshmen live on campus, which has its own parking lot separate of other commuting students that is close to their dorm. Also, the claim that the parking structure is only able to help the enrollment problem for about 5 years is irrelevant because it doesn't show that the parking is bad, but that the structure is ill-accommodating and that a rather more efficient structure should be built. And in terms of including the price of the infrastructure, this is mostly used as an appeal to emotion because of the price of the parking structure, rather than the main claim of how it decreases traffic congestion. The advocate's final secondary claim was that the public transportation is a better option. The first piece of evidence used for this secondary claim is from marketing manager of Skyline Parking, AG, Ladina Glordi, who wrote that a lack of parking is not the sole reason for traffic congestion, and they all come down to having too many cars on the streets. This statement does not add to the argument of public transportation being a better option, and is more of a repeat of what was said earlier in the first secondary claim. But the advocate did not give the complete statements used by Glordi, which say that a lack of parking is not the sole reason for traffic congestion. It is, however, a major contributing factor. And the causes of traffic congestion or traffic jams tend to be complex, but they all come down to having too many cars in the same streets at the same time. So, a major part of the quote saying that a lack of parking is a major contributing factor was taken out, which counters the advocate's claim. In the next piece of evidence, the advocate uses the Texas Transportation Institute report of $770 million saved in Los Angeles and surrounding counties because of public transportation in 2010. And although this evidence is how much money is saved, the advocate does not give an average of what each person can save and uses data from about 5 years ago. The final piece of evidence that the advocate gives is that the foothill transit that used to go through Cal Poly Pomona is under discussion to be brought back. The advocate uses this to show that it encouraged public transportation because it dropped the students closer to their classes than the other bus stops that were outside the school. But the advocate does not show that the traffic congestion was lower when the foothill transit used to go through Pomona. So without the data that shows that the foothill transit helped traffic congestion here, the example becomes irrelevant to the claim. In conclusion, there was not sufficient evidence to show that more parking will result in more traffic. The evidence that showed that the population of students is growing can actually be accounted to the original claim, and there was irrelevant and insufficient evidence used to show that public transportation is a better option than creating more parking in Cal Poly.
All right, structurally everything is fine. I thought you did a nice analysis of the evidence and the reasoning that the advocate used. You frequently had some counterclaims that dealt with other issues there. I thought that the idea that it's a definition of congestion, not the cause of congestion, was pretty straightforward. That explained it. And then later on you come back to the same issue and you've kind of taken the evidence that the advocate used and given it more context to, I think that could apply on that first point as well. On the second point, your explanation I thought was pretty solid about the turnover rate and future students, plus you had a criticism that said that it neglected to consider the large number of students that live on campus, which changes the demand for parking as well. I think that that's a good point that mitigates the argument that the advocate's presenting. And then there's some kind of presses on small things that are going along there. A lot of the criticism might be legitimate, but it's not always as convincing as it ought to be. Part of the problem is that it's all being read and delivered in kind of an analytical sort of thing. It's like you've written a paper analyzing the advocate's argument instead of made a presentation or speech discussing those flaws. And some of the criticism, like I said, is great in a paper form. If we can go over it and think about it 3 times, then it might make more sense. But as an oral argument, it's a little bit confusing. On the third point, I thought that you did a pretty reasonable job mentioning that public transportation is not being adequately supported by the advocate's argument. There's not really any counter-argument presented on this particular point. Like I said, it's well organized. I thought your challenges to the reasoning are effective and the challenges to the evidence. A couple of places you had some good counter-evidence on the points, but I also think that it's an analysis much more than it is an oral argument, and that's a little bit of a problem. All right, thank you.